And welcome to Into the Paradox, the show that pulls back the veil on the mysteries that sit at the crossroads of science, history, and the unknown. I'm your host, Peter Kennedy, and today we step onto the mist-shrouded streets of Poland, a land where centuries-old legends whisper through the cobblestones, and where modern-day disappearances raise unsettling questions that even modern policing struggles to answer. Joining me is Dr. Karolina Nowak, a leading researcher of Polish folklore, urban legends, and the socio-cultural dimensions of the paranormal, hailing from the University of Warsaw. Karolina, thank you so much for being here with us today.
Thank you, Peter. It's truly a pleasure to be on Into the Paradox. My work, as you said, really sits at this fascinating intersection of anthropology and what we often call the uncanny, that feeling of something being familiar yet strangely unsettling. I spend my time examining how collective memory, regional myths, and even contemporary media shape the way communities understand loss, especially when people simply vanish without a trace. It's a very human response to the unexplainable, you know?
Absolutely, that's such a crucial point. It's not just about the numbers, but the human dimension of these disappearances. So let's dive right in then, Karolina. When we talk about missing persons in Poland, what do the statistics actually say? How prevalent is this issue?
It's a really good place to start because the numbers themselves are quite stark. In 2022, the Polish police reported a significant number of missing person cases. We're talking 2,742 total cases. Now, a good portion of these, about 68%, are thankfully resolved within 3 months. People are found, often they've just wandered off or there's a family issue. But the remaining 32%, and this is the crucial part, that's roughly 880 individuals, many of whom remain open, classified, rather chillingly as unexplained disappearances. They just cease to be accounted for, you know?
880 people. That's a staggering number, isn't it? It leaves so many families in limbo. How does that compare internationally, Karolina? Is Poland an outlier, or is this a global phenomenon?
It's actually quite comparable to many other EU nations. So, in terms of raw numbers and percentages, it's not wildly different from, say, Germany or France. However, what really makes Poland unique, from a research perspective, is the quite striking concentration of these unresolved cases in very particular regions. We see spikes in places like Masuria, which is known for its vast, dense forests and lakes, the Carpathian foothills, which are rugged, mountainous, very remote areas, and the Silesian industrial corridor with its old mines and a heavy industrial landscape. Each of these areas has its own unique geography and its own rich, often dark folklore.
That regional concentration is fascinating. It suggests there might be environmental or perhaps even cultural factors at play, beyond just random chance. Are there any demographic trends that stand out among these missing individuals?
Absolutely, there are some very clear patterns. Young adults, typically between 18 and 35, make up a significant portion, 58% of these unresolved cases. It's a demographic often associated with, a bit more risk taking or perhaps being newer to certain areas. There's also a notable gender skew, 70% male, 30% female. When we look closer, disappearances in rural areas often involve individuals who work night shifts in industries like mining or logging, jobs that take them into isolated, often dangerous environments at odd hours. Urban cases, on the other hand, tend to involve students or freelancers, people who might have less structured schedules or social oversight.
So people in transition or in vulnerable situations due to their work or lifestyle. It makes sense. But what about the really difficult ones, the cold cases that just linger for years, sometimes decades? What usually happens with those?
Well, Peter, it's truly grim. A handful, and I mean less than 1%, are eventually linked to foul play or tragic accidents. But for the vast majority of these cold cases, the individuals simply vanish from the record, with families receiving absolutely no closure. It's a void, a gap in knowledge that's incredibly painful. And this vacuum, this complete lack of official explanation, is incredibly fertile ground for folklore to take root. People need answers, and if science can't provide them, older stories often step in to fill that void.
That's such a poignant way to put it, a vacuum that's fertile ground for folklore. Poland is, of course, a country steeped in myth. We're talking about ancient figures like Wodny Dux, Baba Yaga, and the infamous Dziwożona. How have these deeply ingrained, often dark, stories evolved in the context of modern missing persons cases?
Absolutely, Peter. It's a direct response, a cultural coping mechanism almost. In virtually every region, when someone disappears mysteriously, there's an immediate tendency to link it to a guardian of the forest or a river spirit that's either blamed for the vanishing or in some cases seen as having claimed the individual. It's a way to contextualize the incomprehensible. Let me give you three vivid and frankly chilling examples from my fieldwork. First, the Wawel dragon's shadow in Kraków. This was in 2014. A university student vanished while walking along the Vistula River late at night. The official investigation found nothing, but local gossip quickly linked his disappearance to the smoke the ancient dragon said to slumber beneath Wawel Hill, a legend that's been part of Kraków for centuries. Some residents, even claimed to have seen a massive winged silhouette just before the student's disappearance was reported. It became this immediate, almost instinctive explanation.
Wow, a modern-day dragon sighting. That's incredible.
Indeed. Then there's the mysterious Girl of Kłodzko case from Lower Silesia in 1998. A 12-year-old girl vanished from a summer camp near the ancient Kłodzko fortress. Again, no trace. My fellow folklorists and I recorded whispers from the community about a biała dama, a pale lady, a white spectral figure who supposedly lures children into the ruins. To this day, parents in that area tell that story to their kids, not just as a cautionary tale, but almost as a protective measure to keep them from wandering after dusk near the old fortress. The myth became a warning and an explanation.
So the legend almost becomes reactivated by the event and then takes on a new life.
Precisely. And my third example is much more recent, the Sierrad's fog in the Łódź Voivodeship, just from 2020. 3 hikers disappeared amid a sudden, incredibly dense fog in the Sierrad's forest. This area is historically associated with the Czarna Ducha, a black spirit or wraith that supposedly steals breath from travellers. After this triple disappearance, local media, perhaps uncharacteristically, ran a series of pieces that explicitly referred to it as a paranormal fog. The myth was already there, but the event gave it this fresh, terrifying legitimacy in the public consciousness.
Those are genuinely chilling, Karolina. And it makes perfect sense that in the absence of hard facts, people turn to these older stories. But do families, the people directly affected, ever lean on these narratives for comfort, or maybe even as a coping mechanism, to make sense of something so utterly senseless?
Oh, absolutely, Peter. It's a very common human response. When official answers lag and there's no body, no evidence, no explanation, this mythic framework provides a story, a narrative to hold on to. It gives a reason, however supernatural, for the incomprehensible. It's a way to externalize the blame, perhaps, or to give the lost loved one a destination, even if that destination is the spirit realm. It's a double-edged sword, though. On one hand, it can provide profound psychological comfort and meaning, especially in communities where these myths are deeply embedded, but on the other, it can significantly hinder official investigations by spreading misinformation, diverting resources, or simply encouraging families to accept a supernatural explanation rather than push for continued empirical research. It's a complex dynamic.
That's a really insightful point about the double-edged nature of it. So let's talk about your own research, Karolina. Given this delicate balance between empirical facts and these deep-rooted beliefs, how do you approach a case that essentially straddles the empirical and the paranormal? How do you even begin to investigate such a thing?
It's a challenge, but a fascinating one. My methodology is typically threefold. I start with exhaustive archival research, poring over police logs, historical records, old newspaper clippings. Then there's ethnographic immersion, living in the communities, conducting countless oral history interviews with witnesses, family members, local historians, just absorbing the local culture and its narratives. And then, when appropriate, we move into what I call controlled paranormal fieldwork. This isn't about proving ghosts, it's about systematically documenting anomalies. A recent project, the Szczecin Railway vanishings, really illustrates this approach.
Tell us about that. It sounds intriguing.
So in Szczecin, West Pomerania, between 2005 and 2015, there were 12 unresolved disappearances, all near the sprawling railway yards. My team first reviewed all the police logs looking for patterns. We then conducted over 30 oral history interviews with former railway workers, their families and local historians. What emerged was a shared legend of a railway wraith that supposedly collects souls at the 3 a.m. whistle. Workers consistently reported this low-frequency hum, a kind of night shift whistle, followed by a feeling of profound disorientation just before some of these disappearances.
And how did you approach the paranormal fieldwork for that?
We set up nighttime audiovisual monitoring at the most frequently reported spot near the yards. We deployed extremely sensitive low-frequency microphones, to pick up any infrasound, and thermal cameras. What we found was extraordinary. Our microphones consistently picked up an anomalous low-frequency resonance around 3 a.m., just as the workers described. and on 3 separate nights our thermal footage captured fleeting humanoid silhouettes moving swiftly, almost gliding through the yard, disappearing within seconds. There was no physical evidence left behind, no footprints, nothing, but the correlation of the specific timing, the deep-seated local folklore, and these anomalous recordings was, to put it mildly, striking.
That is absolutely fascinating, Karolina. To capture something on thermal imagery, even fleetingly, that aligns with both local legend and an acoustic anomaly, it's quite compelling. But how do you, as a researcher, maintain scientific rigor when you're dealing with phenomena that are, by definition, elusive, often ephemeral, and easily dismissed as subjective experience?
That's the core challenge, and it's where my anthropological training really comes into play. We maintain rigor by treating the paranormal not as proof of spirits or anything mystical, but as a variable. We record data meticulously, note patterns, and then we ask, if a phenomenon exists, what would it predict? And can that prediction be reproduced or independently verified? We're looking for consistency, not just a single anomalous event. In the Szczecin case, for example, the consistent 3 a.m. timing, the specific nature of the recorded low-frequency resonance, and the correlation with the workers' experiences, as well as the thermal images, allow us to hypothesize that infrasound, for instance, is known to affect human perception, sometimes causing disorientation or even feelings of dread. So while we can't prove a ghost, we can certainly document a confluence of factors that could lead to extraordinary experiences, or in these cases, vanishings. It's about careful observation, rigorous data collection, and open-minded yet skeptical interpretation.
That's a very nuanced and responsible approach. So let's tackle the big question that I'm sure is on many of our listeners' minds. Could paranormal forces actually be responsible for any of these missing person cases in Poland, or anywhere else for that matter?
It's the million-dollar question, isn't it? And among researchers, and certainly the public, several hypotheses circulate. We have to consider them all, even if some feel more out there than others. One is, of course, the psychic or spiritual abduction theory. This posits that entities, be they demons, spirits, even extraterrestrials in some broader global context, are physically removing individuals from our plane of existence. Supporting points for this often include consistent reports of white light or sudden cold spots immediately before vanishings, and there are cultural parallels globally, like the Mothman disappearances in West Virginia that many listeners might know.
But the critiques of that theory, I imagine, are pretty significant.
Oh, absolutely. The main one is a stark lack of physical evidence, aside from anecdotal testimony. And of course, Occam's razor generally favours more mundane explanations when possible. Then you have the environmental or acoustic entrainment theory. This suggests that low-frequency sounds, particularly infrasound, can cause disorientation, hallucinations, or even a loss of consciousness. There's documented evidence of infrasound effects like the hum experienced in Bristol in the 1990s. Our Szczecin whistle case certainly lends some credence to this, showing how environmental factors could trigger unusual perceptions.
So a naturally occurring phenomenon, or something man-made, could actually cause someone to literally wander off without knowing it.
Exactly. The critique here, though, is that it requires specific sound sources, which aren't always present or identifiable in every disappearance. Another theory, less paranormal but very important for context, is sociocultural stigmatization. This suggests that individuals with mental health issues, those suffering from addiction, or those from marginalized communities might disappear due to societal neglect. We see a higher incidence among itinerant workers or runaway youth. Families are often reluctant to involve police immediately, or the police might not prioritize these cases as much. This doesn't explain supernatural phenomena, of course, but it's a very real factor in certain cases.
That's a sobering thought, that some might simply fall through the cracks of society.
Indeed, and finally, we can't ignore deliberate human action like kidnapping or human trafficking. Criminal networks are known to exploit remote regions and even local folklore to conceal their activities. Some cases, like a 2019 human trafficking bust in Krakow, have eventually been resolved as human-caused, but this again cannot account for all the truly unexplained disappearances.
So it sounds like the truth probably sits somewhere in the middle, or perhaps it's a combination of several factors, rather than one single neat explanation.
Precisely, Peter, that's the paradox right there. It lies in our human tendency to polarize, to draw a hard line between science and the paranormal. In reality, human perception, very real environmental factors, and these incredibly powerful cultural narratives interlock in complex ways. They create a kind of feedback loop that can amplify fear, distort memory, and ultimately obscure the facts. It's a very messy, very human mystery.
And recognizing that messiness is probably the first step to understanding it. Given all these complexities, Karolina, how are local authorities and civil societies in Poland responding to this unique challenge of missing persons, especially when folklore and the paranormal are so woven into the fabric of the community.
It's encouraging to see a more integrated approach emerging. Since 2018, the Polish police have actually instituted a specialised missing persons unit, or MPU, which now actively collaborates with forensic psychologists and GIS specialists to map and analyse these complex cases. They're really trying to bring advanced techniques to bear on a persistent problem.
That's a significant step, I think, to recognise the unique psychological and geographical aspects.
Absolutely, and beyond official channels, there are fantastic NGO initiatives like Znikające, which translates to vanishing. It's a volunteer network that runs night watch patrols in high-risk forest zones, equipped with GPS trackers and emergency radios. They act as eyes and ears on the ground, providing crucial support in areas where people are most likely to disappear. Then you have cultural projects, for instance local museums like the Museum of Polish Legends in Lublin. They've hosted exhibitions that present both the mythic and investigative sides of disappearances, aiming to educate the public rather than sensationalise. It helps to contextualise the folklore rather than just dismissing it.
So they're using the cultural context to help inform, rather than just letting it run wild.
Precisely, and on the digital front, we have an open source database called Paranormal.org. It crowdsources sightings, photographs, and even audio recordings, allowing citizen scientists to contribute data in a structured way. It empowers local communities and gives people a way to engage with the issue constructively.
It's genuinely encouraging to see this multidisciplinary approach, combining hard science, community effort, and even cultural understanding to tackle such a profound mystery. Karolina, before we wrap up today, what's the most compelling piece of evidence you've personally encountered during your fieldwork that still, to this day, truly haunts you?
Oh, that's a tough one, Peter. So many instances stick with you. But if I had to pick one, it was during fieldwork near the Gdańsk-Błędów swamp. We were conducting nighttime infrared camera monitoring. Our camera captured a faint, almost ethereal, luminescent figure hovering just above the water's surface. It lasted for exactly 12 seconds before simply vanishing. There was no wind, no wildlife movement that could explain it, just that silent, glowing form. It never repeated, despite further attempts. But that recording still sits on my hard drive, a constant reminder that some things truly resist easy categorization, and perhaps some mysteries are meant to remain, at least for now.
A silent glow, hovering for 12 seconds in a swamp. That's a truly haunting image. Karolina, thank you so much for sharing that, and for shedding so much light on an issue that's both deeply human and profoundly mysterious. Your work truly embodies the spirit of Into the Paradox.
It's been my absolute pleasure, Peter, and I hope listeners keep questioning both the numbers on a page and the stories whispered in the dark. That's where the truth often lies.
If you enjoyed today's episode, please do us a favor and spread the word. Until next time, stay curious, because the paradox is always waiting just beyond the next question.